Hi everyone, welcome to Right by Mia. I'm Mia and I'm so happy to be back. I recently got married and so I took a bit of a break, but I'm really happy to be back with all of you for our fourth Writers Library on dun 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 dun, Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. So I read this book actually not too long before I started doing more wedding planning and honeymoon stuff, and I was really moved by it. Shout out to her as a Stanford alum. I loved her debut novel, Homegoing, so I was really excited to dig into this one as it seemed a pretty interesting departure from the style of Homegoing. Instead of being little vignettes as Homegoing was, this one really focused on one character, one family, and kind of followed her through. So just a quick summary of what the book is about. Our main character here is Gifty, and she is a PhD student at Stanford, studying addiction and depression in mice. And a lot of the book follows her in the present doing that, but also discusses her family's history of addiction and mental illness, and both the drug overdose of her brother as well as her mother's depression. So it's a really, interesting, very moving and poignant novel to dig into. So I definitely would recommend it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you guys. So I think the first thing that really struck me about the book and that I really liked about it was this idea of Black respectability, and the idea that you have to be 2, 3, 5 times as great in order to really prove yourself to white people, white America. Gifty and her family are immigrants living in Alabama, so Black people, majority white environment, and I think Yaa did such a fantastic job of discussing that really difficult sort of tension and drive to always try to be better and improve yourself and your worth as a Black person to the white people and the whiteness around you. And I think it is, really encapsulated in this sort of sentence kind of near the beginning of the book where she says, "But the memory lingered, the lesson I have never quite been able to shake, that I would always have something to prove, and that nothing but blazing brilliance would be enough to prove it." And it's interesting because what really struck me about that sentence was the blazing brilliance phrase. I immediately thought of like a meteor, like a shooting star, some like ethereal, once in a lifetime event that you can't help but notice. And it just really put this weight and pressure behind what Gifty, the main character, is feeling as she attempts to come to terms with her Blackness and immigrant status in Alabama, among the community she's in. And I am not an immigrant, but I did grow up in a predominantly white space, and so for me, I guess personally in my life, that just really struck me in feeling that I really had to maybe prove myself or show everyone how great I was in a way, as the only Black person, the only Black woman in a lot of spaces I grew up in. So I think that through line from growing up in Alabama to then finding herself at Stanford, one of very few women of color, even people of color in her field, was really moving, and I thought she did such a beautiful job with that. And I think another big topic that Yaa tackled in this novel was mental illness in the Black community. I mean, it's such an important topic, and I think she handled it so deftly, especially because of the relationship, that Gifty has with her mother. It is so fraught. She explains many times that her, older brother Nana, who passed, was undoubtedly her mother's favorite. She was never really seen as the favorite child. Her mother said that she really didn't want her, and her mother has gone through a couple of depressive episodes throughout her life, and now her mother has come to her in California at Stanford and is staying with her as Gifty is finishing her PhD study. So it's so much fabulous tension, relationship tension. For those of you who've read my work, you know that I love, writing about relationships and those kind of intimate moments that cause so much conflict. And I think Yaa does a great job of showing that conflict, and from how it started when Gifty was younger to now she is the caretaker, in her mid-20s of her mother, who is now staying with her. And I think it really is demonstrated just beautifully throughout the book. I'm going to read a passage here that I don't know, it really moved me when she's describing her mother and learning to understand what her depression means and how it's affecting them. In those just the two of us years after my return from Ghana, I had studied her face for any sign of collapse, trying to make myself an expert on the shades of sadness I recognized in her eyes. Was it lurking there again, the dark, deep sadness? Or was it just the everyday kind, the kind we all have from time to time, the kind that comes and, more important, goes? And that to me is just such a simple, elegant way of describing the depression she has seen in her mother. And there's also this sort of like innocent just grief in it. I think you can just feel all those shades of her being young and dealing with her mother's depression, and how there are echoes of that still as she is older. And of course, given that she is studying addiction and depression in mice, you can just tell that she is continually affected by that in her studies, even if now she has more of a scientific or more clinical objective gaze about it. And thirdly, and kind of last, one topic that she tackles, and a big theme throughout the book, is this aspect of religion versus science. It's very clear throughout the book that Gifty grows up in a very religious household. Her mother, takes Gifty and her brother to church all the time. They, are famously an integrated part of the congregation. They're mostly an all-white congregation, and Gifty grows up, really taught to be pious and religious, and trying to figure out what that means as she leaves that community, for school, and starts to live her own life. And especially given all of those struggles in Gifty's families, from her brother's addiction to her mother's depression, there's just so many heartbreaking, aching moments of her questioning God. And what's really great is she has these short little journal entries that she puts of when she was younger, and you just really see this change as her brother starts to get deeper into his addiction, of feeling that doubt creep in, and what that means for her and her thinking towards God and even religion in general, and what it can mean. And this is actually near the end of the book, but I think it just really touches on this theme so well. And wrapped up in all of this is, as I mentioned earlier, this idea of Black respectability, her never feeling like she fit in at her church, and feeling that this white congregation was looking down on her and her family, judging them harshly, really not allowing them to truly fit in and integrate. So there's so many just meaty topics throughout the whole novel, and I think especially in these few sentences. Where was God in all of this? Where was God if he was not in the hushed quiet of a Sunday school room? Where was God if he was not in me? If my blackness was a kind of indictment, if Nana would never be healed, and if my congregation could never truly believe in the possibility of his healing, then where was God? And for me, there's so much anger and hurt there that has been really built up throughout the novel up until that point, and now kind of comes out in this series of questions. And I think it just touches on that broader, question and understanding of like how religion historically has been used to like oppress Black people, but at the same time how Black people, Black churches, Black congregations have used God and religion to uplift and create their communities in spite of all of that. And for her to come to it from a white congregation, I found so interesting, and really separating herself from that and taking a step back and going the complete opposite way from her religious upbringing because of the ways in which the congregation did not seem to value, respect, or care about her family's mental illness, as well as her brother's addiction. Just was so, I don't know, like crushing a bit. I grew up very, religious. I still am. But I think these questions are so important, and I think really dives deep into the intricacies of what religion means for people. And sometimes, the refuge some people can find in science, which is what Gifty does, and that she is untangling all these threads of hurt and discovery and growth in these mice and in her studies about addiction and depression from a very specific scientific lens. So as you can probably tell, I really enjoyed this book. I really liked the questions that it brought to the surface, and I just really liked in general that Yaa took a departure from her first novel and did something really different. I always admire authors who can really switch up either what they write about, how they write, and are willing to take chances and just dive deep into different characters or different ways of writing that they hadn't before. And I just love that she is a Black woman who is a Stanford alum. So hoping to be more like her one day, I guess. But that's it. I definitely would recommend it. I'll put a link in the comments of where you can buy it from a Black-owned bookstore if you so wish. And I hope you all get the chance to read it because I did really enjoy it, and I think you all will too. I am so happy to be back. I will have new content dropping weekly. Not as much short stories, but I actually have short vignettes coming, as well as some new content on the writer's life that I'll be dropping here soon. So really encourage you all to like and subscribe, as the next few months are going to be really fun and really busy. I'm really excited. Again, thank you all so much for your continued support. I love doing this, love sharing this time with you. And I guess I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one. Bye.